All right, it is Friday, June 26, 2025. We are here today for another Ask Me Anything panel with a bit of an X or Twitter all-star panel. I don't know, Deanna, you're not on Twitter, are you?
No.
No, you're missing out on,
all the fun.
yeah, all the fun. I don't know how
I
to
don't
describe it.
know. Yeah,
I feel like the
exactly.
algorithm is designed so that one day it sends me stuff I agree with, and then the next day it's all stuff I disagree with.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. I don't need any encouragement, really.
yeah, that's so joining Kubir Kamal, who optimist, Mr. Optimist, the forever optimist on Canadian immigration law.
Forever hopeful.
Forever hopeful. Yeah,
That's awesome.
I
Yeah, me too.
we had Kubir on before, and I had the pleasure of meeting him in person, actually. Oh, I guess seeing you again in person at
Yeah.
Lake Louise, which was a lot of fun.
It
And
was.
Tamara Mosher-Kuczer, fresh off of speaking at CBA, our express entry expert, and
Yeah.
from the nation's capital.
I feel like we
Another
still
Twitter
butcher
extraordinary.
Tamara's name. Can you say again how you're doing, how you say it?
Mosher-Kuczer, but everyone does. So
Okay.
we
But
just
what about
accept
your
it.
first name? How do we?
Tamara.
Tamara. Okay.
Yeah. Tamara joins us every year where we review how we got what would happen in the previous year wrong. And then we boldly make predictions with confidence for the upcoming year.
Yeah.
It's been 3 years running, 4 years running.
We get
I mean,
kind of
I already
worse
know.
every year.
We predicted that
Do you then
Polyev
also
would
do a
win.
recap? Do you also do a recap as to say which of those
Oh, yeah.
predictions?
Yeah, we
came
always review everything. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we, based on our predictions, we should be in month 3 of Polyev and all the policies that he was going to do. So
Well, it's funny because we're getting the same policies, but just with a different leader.
right,
The
right.
conservative policies with a liberal leader. Yeah.
But before we get into express entry, we should just do an update. The Supreme Court today released a very big decision for litigators. I'm not sure how many people it actually impacts, but we did an episode last year on the Federal Court of Appeal decision involving this, and I just thought I'd recap it. The Supreme Court decision today is PEPA, P-E-P-A, and just to recap, basically, Canadian immigration law says that if someone has a permanent resident visa and they show up basically at the airport, then they're issued a removal order that they have a right of appeal. Basically, the exact wording is a foreign national who holds a permanent resident visa may appeal to the Immigration Appeal Division against a decision to make a removal order against them. So Miss Peppa arrives in Canada. She has a permanent resident visa. CBSA alleges that she committed misrepresentation. They refer her to the Immigration Division. There is a delay in the scheduling of the Immigration Division hearing, and by the time of the hearing, her visa has expired. So at the Immigration Division hearing, they issue her a removal order. She tries to appeal to the Immigration Appeal Division, and the IAD goes, look, we know it wasn't your fault that there's a scheduling delay, but by the time the removal order was issued, your visa was actually expired, so you cannot appeal. She takes it to the federal court. Federal court found it was reasonable. Goes to the Federal Court of Appeal. They found that it was reasonable. And then the Supreme Court sets it aside and says basically that everything that had occurred before was absurd and that, well, I'll just quote the Supreme Court quickly, get your thoughts, and then we'll move on to express entry. Quote the Supreme Court, the Immigration Appeal Division's approach and outcome renders a visa holder's appeal eligibility contingent on how quickly any post-arrival inadmissibility case brought against them moves through the system.
Sweet.
A result that is particularly problematic for visa holders whose visa expires within a short period of time. The IAD's interpretation results in the possibility that a visa holder can lose their right to appeal before the decision is taken, in Ms. Peppa's case, even before the hearing has begun. The question is whether it is reasonable to assume that Parliament intended that result based on the provision's wording, purpose, and legislative history. Parliament could not have intended a result which is both absurd and arbitrary. And so they set it aside. Raj Sharma, who was on last week or 2 weeks ago, has already commented on social media. What about the fact that sometimes, and I'm sure maybe you've seen this, someone gets to CBSA with their permanent resident visa and CBSA says, hold on a second. They contact IRCC. IRCC just cancels the approval. And there have been issues of whether that is appealable. I would think after this that it is. But yeah, welcome win in the Supreme Court for a bit of common sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think that this is, even though it will, as you say, Steve, affect a very small group of people who happen to have this delay between when they get their PR visa, when they arrive. I think what this does say to me is that there has been a growing move to limit appeal rights. And that's something we're seeing in many different contexts. And that even though there has been an encroachment on right of appeal, that has been found to be reasonable at the entry level courts, let's say the federal court, the Federal Court of Appeal, in prior years. And it's sad that you're having to go all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada to get that common sense decision. But I'm glad that it did go back to common sense, and hopefully that will send a trending down toward the lower courts that you shouldn't have to litigate for, I don't know how many years this will be now, that Ms. Peppa had to go from a decision to the Supreme Court of Canada, and how much money had to be spent on litigation just to get back to common sense.
Yeah, I already, as soon as I read the decision, I messaged some people at work. We have some procedural fairness letter responses for allegations of Chinese espionage on the Lee standard. And I said basically, I think that's all absurd. And so I want to try to use this similar language that the idea that someone can be inadmissible to Canada because they may in the future be coerced into committing espionage, to me is also absurd.
Yeah.
So we'll see. Are we ready? Express entry?
You just have some sort of a drum roll now, Steven.
The drum roll.
Yeah.
And there are comments coming in fast and furious. We have comments that we got before, but let's start with the big one. Some variation that we're going to get. Are the scores coming down to 505 this year? Tamara?
I think it's possible. We've seen it go down to 507, but I think there was a great post on LinkedIn by a consultant named Berkew, and she got a data set from the government that showed that there were 16,000 people between 500 and 525 in March. So that tells you how many people are there. So it depends how many draws there are, and it depends how many people are coming into the pool, whether or not it drops to 505. I would say possible, but unlikely. And I don't think we're going to go below 5 for 2 years.
Kabir, do you have the optimist?
I share a similar sentiment, and again, I would go basically to the data set as to how many rounds of invitation we can have for this year, for the remainder of the year. We have approximately 6 months. Even if you go with a bi-weekly, you're looking at roughly 12 to 14 rounds of draws, provided IRCC doesn't take off for a few more weeks in between during this period of time. So between 12 to 14 draws, and amongst them, you will also have some category draws as well. So therefore, that would again put some sort of a hiatus between the express entry draws. So if there are approximately 10 draws, let's say, just go with a bit more optimistic view here. But even if there are about 10 draws with 3,000 ITAs, again, a bit skeptic there with 3,000, but that would bring it to about 30,000 ITAs. Number of people in the pool, roughly 23,000 as of right now. Each 2 weeks, you have about roughly 1,000 people adding in. So the net difference for each draw is about 2,000. For 10 draws, that basically means 20,000 people get taken off, which still means 505 is a possibility, but it's a bit far-reaching one at this point of time. Can happen if IRCC changes the tone and brings in 4,000, 5,000 kind of draws, then yes. But otherwise, it's a bit of a reach at this point of time.
And how much is that impacted by whether or not the government continues to try and meet its targets with respect to French language speakers.
There it is.
Well, they're pulling from the bottom, right? They're pulling from the bottom, and the more they pull from the bottom, like the more people sit in the top. But like they're different categories. The people who are coming for CEC, they're the in Canada focus. It's under the federal skilled something or other in the targets, whereas all the categories and French speaking it's coming from a different number, right? So I don't think like the French
it's coming from a different number, but if they get rid of the francophone category, that frees up space.
Mm-hmm.
But it'll free up space for the other categories. It won't free up space for the CECs. Because all the categories are coming from.
So the francophone category is based on this, like, here we go. People are gonna. The francophone category is based on this desire, largely led by the Senate, to get Canada up to a certain percentage of francophones outside of Quebec. The size of the category-based draws is that big to accommodate the francophone stream. So I don't think you get rid of this emphasis on francophone migration without also shrinking the size of the category-based draws. Now, how likely is it that they get rid of the category-based draws? Or the francophone emphasis? Mark Carney in the 2025 election specifically campaigned on increasing it. So he would have to explicitly break a campaign promise in order to do that. How much would anyone care about the campaign promise? I don't know. But that to me is the biggest obstacle, is that this was a specific campaign promise from a government that is in a minority position and relies in part on the Bloc and a lot of Quebec seats. So I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah, I don't see them getting rid of it, and they've said that their focus is this federal economic priorities. So their focus are the categories. Their focus are these francophone draws.
Yeah, I don't know how legible this is, but I think Kubir pulled up
no, this
data.
was what Tamara was talking about. This is an RCIC Bourgeois. She obtained this data set from 8 through 8, and this basically is from April, early April, and gives you a bit of a snapshot of what the pool breakdown looks like. Some interesting ones over here is the number of people who are in the pool as of early April 7th, I think that's when the data set was from. But then after that, there has been a big, it's from April 7th. But after that, there has been this big gap, right? That the draws were not conducted. More people got added into the pool as well. But what happened is that because they were able to remove the job offer points, the number of people who are now getting added to the pool, that number is not that high. Earlier, it used to be about 2,500 people getting added every 2 weeks. Now that number has dropped to under 1,000. So that has brought in a significant change there. If you look at this one, it shows, at least it has a little bit of a snapshot of how many people were in the pool, because IRCC doesn't give us the pool breakdown between 501 and 600. They just give you a complete chunk there.
So is the pool shrinking or growing? Like, part of the theory was that as less temporary people are admitted, the pool should shrink. Is it actually shrinking?
No, it's been pretty much consistent since it
will shrink. I mean, I know what you're saying, but it will shrink now that the number of people getting added because no job offer points, that number is less. And if you keep drawing out, let's say 3,000 invitations every 2 weeks, but the number of people getting added is only 1,000. So the net difference of 2,000, that would be the shrink, I guess.
I'm just really fascinated. These numbers are really, really interesting, especially the number of like nurses, nurse aides, IT professionals just below the 500 point bar. It brings me to one of the questions that was asked by one of our listeners about like STEM categories, but also healthcare. I'm really curious about healthcare categories. I'm just wondering what kind of insight either of you have about For me, with healthcare, I don't think anybody would disagree that there are healthcare shortages and that this is an area where, you know, we could really stand to gain resources that we very much need. You know, I'm interested in your thoughts about that, but also like in the STEM field, I'm sort of confused and curious about, I understand that there are some hiring freezes and issues about that, but I'm just wondering about what insight you have about that, because I feel like, why is that not a growth area right now, given how much work there is in growing artificial intelligence, trying to get systems up and working? I mean, they're two kind of big and very distinct questions, but I just kind of like, there seems to be a lot to think about there. You know, just throwing that open for your thoughts.
Well, for healthcare, I think like if they did a bigger draw, the problem is the 2 draws they've done are so small, it kept the scores high. I think they're going to do larger draws, and I think the scores will drop. I'm hopeful that they'll drop down to the 460s like they did in 2024. But in 2024, I think they only did 2 healthcare draws.
Yeah, but you're right. They were tiny, and the scores were very, very high. And so, yeah, you know, a lot of people that I was working with, extremely skilled, but didn't hit the number.
Yeah, but I'm hopeful because there is this focus that they will do larger healthcare draws, and that will drop the score. But with STEM, they like eviscerated the category. So many of the occupations are gone, and almost all the IT occupations are gone. I think because there were so many, there was so much upheaval in the industry in the last year and so many layoffs. It remains to be seen kind of whether they remove those occupations from the global talent stream.
The irony of the layoffs is like the STEM category is also largely people who are here in Canada working.
Mm-hmm.
So by removing those occupations from express entry, all they're doing is essentially causing future layoffs by people who can't extend their stay here.
Yeah.
Like
And
there's an irony in that the way they prioritize immigration will exacerbate that, which, you know, it's just like a circle.
Yeah, for sure.
And they're people that came on GTS LMIAs or people who came under the H-1B exemption program. Like they created these programs, and now they're, you know, not actually making a pathway for permanent residence. It's it's nonsensical.
Yeah.
There's another school of thought on this healthcare issue. When you keep the scores that high, you aren't going to attract any global talent, which seems to be the mandate of our new prime minister. Because people outside Canada just cannot get to that number. You can't cross mathematically, as per the points grid, you can't cross 500. So you're not going to get the global talent coming unless you're talking about the in-Canada focus. That's number one. Number two, I personally, I've not been in favor of category draws the way it has been designed. By just asking for 6 months of experience, you're opening another can of worms for more fraud, for more misuse, for more abuse. I mean, has it really stopped the diploma mills to come up with all these PSW courses, right? I mean, I'm not sure if you've seen them, but they're all over the internet, all over the Instagram, TikTok, Reels, everywhere, that you can do your PSW courses like this in a snap of a finger. You can do it online. You can do it through one of these courses. And of course, there's an ongoing debate of whether you can study while you are on your work permit. So if you can do it in the less than 6 months, a lot of people have been promoting that. So over the last couple of years, lots and lots of international students and foreign workers who didn't have an option have been completing these courses. Then they have been able to get that 6 months of work experience in a retirement home, in an old age home, in all these centers as a personal support workers, therefore qualifying under nursing aids. And that number now is pretty significant. That has been growing. I mean, even if they were to conduct a larger size draws today, I don't expect the scores to really go down to 460s anymore, primarily because you have now created this big chunk of people who are now going to be in the scores of 470s, 480s, 490s, who probably will qualify because they are nursing aides. They've done the 6 months, got 6 months of experience, and now will be eligible there. So again, you are completely, shutting the door on the real individuals who really have the skill set that you need to bring into Canada. 6 months of
100%.
work experience, anybody could get in. I mean, what does it take to get 6 months of experience? And how does it really benefit the Canadian public at large? 6 months of experience, is that all we need now?
Yeah, you put it so well there, Kabir. And also that like, it gives a specific advantage to the young person who has less work experience rather than the doctor who has been doing this work for 10 years and is a specialist in their field and, you know, just would like to live in Canada and is like exceptional, but you know,
But that doctor won't be allowed to practice here anyway. So,
exactly. And so it's like, it's so absurd, but you're like a fresh graduate, you have a high, like, you have, you know, so again, it's very mind bending to watch from this perspective, because we can see as practitioners that the ones that are going to qualify are less experienced, less
Educated.
expert. Yeah, 100% than the people that will be cut out. And so it's very backward.
The whole age, like the whole way that they've weighted the system with age is incredibly short-sighted.
And it's very contrary to what Kabir called the best and the brightest mentality, which they're flogging in their PR. But, you know, we can see on the ground how that's exactly the opposite of the effect it's having. They just want more taxpayer years, perhaps. But my experience is that the young entrants, there's no real, like they may well move 3 more times before they've stopped paying their taxes, while the older immigrants, they tend to be here for good, you know? And so it's odd.
Yeah, there's a bit of like, I mean, the issue is once you move away, like there's a logic behind more points for young, less for old. Then once you move into like, well, what about actual experience? You start getting into qualitative assessments, which the department just really doesn't.
I know, but qualitative assessments are actually, I believe there's a better value. These, you know, and I understand it's harder to do. It's maybe slower, but there is.
I see what you're saying. I just think if they did it, they would introduce allegations of bias, allegations of this person prefers this occupation versus that. I think it just, I hear what you're saying. I see the counter argument. I want to switch gears to another issue that's hot and furious. And maybe Kabir, you've tweeted or posted maybe on LinkedIn. I can't remember where I saw it, about this issue of, the question is loosely related to this, which is I just received my ITA yesterday and I'm currently single/engaged. My partner is in Canada. We're getting married in August, but I won't be sponsoring. Will this affect me later? And I think by sponsoring, she probably means that adding this person as an accompanying spouse. And there's a big issue raging within Express Entry right now about people who are married and often living with someone in Canada who have spouses who they've declared as non-accompanying. Do you want to maybe explain about the background of why this is an issue with the way points work in Express Entry, and then sort of the plethora of letters that IRCC is sending now?
Okay, so I mean, I just wanted to sort of backtrack a bit, and what we were having this earlier discussion about this whole Express Entry primarily went into discussion, I think somewhere in 2012, if I'm not wrong, and it took them like a couple of years to figure out what kind of points should be assigned and how should the Express Entry system, be designed or developed. Eventually, it was launched in 2015. All of us know that. But in those 3 years, whatever they came up with, I don't think it's in effect anymore. We are 12, 13 years later. Things have changed. Dynamics have changed. Demographics have changed. And I think Express Entry system by itself completely needs an overhaul. Think about it. We're just talking about doctors, surgeons, nuclear scientists, whatever that might be. People who can really, really add and contribute to what Canada needs today. They have same preference, or they have the same value within the Express Entry system, just like, and with no offense to anybody out there, just like a food services supervisor. Now, I'm comparing it to a food services supervisor because of the skill that is required to do that job. Absolutely nothing else. So no offense out there. But for a food services supervisor, anybody with a high school diploma or even less could actually perform the job. But as a doctor, as a surgeon, as a nuclear physician or nuclear scientist, you definitely need that skill set. But when you give them same value in the grid point, you are completely diminishing the fact of you really want highly skilled talent to come to Canada. So that was the point I wanted to make in the first place. But now, and on the same, and just segueing from the same thing, the same express entry system gives you points. And I guess this was designed long way back for singles and married. And singles obviously get more points because it's understood that as a married couple, your spouse could also add additional points. I think it's 40 points now with their education, Canadian work experience, English language skills score. Obviously, a lot of spouses are not able to add those points, therefore prompting individuals who would like to score better in express entry to disclose their spouses, of course married, but disclose that as not accompanying, which has now triggered a huge concern from IRCC. We've been seeing this on some MREPs as well as on some ATIP notes as well, that it's known to IRCC. They know that a lot of people have been misusing that to sort of increase their points. People have been getting refusals. I know at least of one case that has already is now in the JR phase, and people have been getting procedural fairness letters where the officer is expressing concerns that the only reason why the spouse is not accompanying is because the officer feels the applicant would like to increase their points, and that's the reason for doing it, therefore calling it intentional misrepresentation or gaming the system or manipulating the system, if you would like to call it. But to Amy's question here, she received an ITA. When she does get married, she will have to disclose that she's married. She can, of course, choose to have her spouse not accompanying her, though I'm not sure if she's aware that if she gets married after she has submitted her PR application in express entry, a 11.2 assessment will not impact her, and therefore her points won't get reduced. So therefore there should be no reason for not having her spouse accompany her. But if she chooses to, or whatever the reason might be, if the spouse is not accompanying, she can provide a brief reason, but everything else will still be the same. The spouse will still have to go through the inadmissibility checks, the police clearances, the medicals, though all of those will still have to be provided, including all the proof for the marital relationship being genuine. So yeah, that's
the other thing is if they're living together, then they would be common law or potentially common law if they've been living together for 12 months, and then there's a risk if they're not disclosed as part of the application and not included with the application of the procedural fairness letter. And I think what's really interesting about all this what's coming up now with the procedural fairness letters is that IRCC has known about this issue since the very inception of express entry. This has been raised, and they always said from the get-go, like, they didn't care. They knew that people weren't disclosing their spouses or like as accompanying and sponsoring them later. And in the early days of express entry, they really just didn't seem to care as long as you explained it as part of the application. But now IRCC is turning around and issuing these procedural fairness letters. And I think like what's important in arguing this is it really does come down to intention at the time of application, and what IRCC is like really honing in on in these procedural fairness letters, particularly is if the spouse is in Canada, then like how could you have an intention not to be accompanying if they're already here?
Yeah. I hear everything that you're saying, and I think that that's absolutely correct. But I think that I find like if somebody is making an application and they're saying, my spouse is here in Canada, you're giving their Canadian address, and you're saying, they're here in Canada, I do not intend to seek permanent residence for them because they will not be remaining in Canada. And you state a clear intention, and that intention later changes. I don't see how that can be a misrepresentation. If in fact, then you immediately sponsoring them, then I can understand how that would turn into misrepresentation allegation. So as long as the person is being truthful all the way along and they can make a credible claim that their intention changed, then to me, that's what it should come right down to. But
what would be examples that you can think of someone, living in Canada with their spouse? They have a Canadian-born spouse, and the child.
You don't want to be giving
the spouse
ideas.
would be what? Would the spouse would be non-accompanying?
You don't want to be giving the ideas, Steven, because
right?
that's the reasons that people will be then putting up in their applications.
Yeah.
I would like to ask you guys, actually disclosing the truth that I would not want my spouse to accompany me because I would like to increase my points.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find that in immigration law anywhere, or anywhere where it says you can't do this. And if you
Yeah.
are actually saying this and disclosing this as truth, why should this be considered as misrepresentation and be held against you? Because there's nothing where it says you can't do this, or this
Yeah,
is considered as
exactly.
Well, it would just depend if it's misrep or not, right? Like if they, so I've looked at this because some consultants have showed me the PFLs and I've done some research on it. So
Yeah.
I've just pulled open like the IRCC website defines accompanying family as an accompanying family member is someone who plans to immigrate to Canada with the principal applicant.
Yeah, exactly.
I've
Like
looked,
if you're not seeking permanent residence for them, that means they will not be
so
entitled
immigrating though
to
goes
work.
beyond that, right? Like you can like it's what are they doing? Like if there's the question of like why aren't they applying for permanent residence?
Yeah.
But it's also like, are they in fact here and have they actually like if they're here and it would depend on the facts, but just
They're
because they
accompanying you
haven't
as a visitor. They're asking whether or not they're intending to accompany you as a permanent resident. That's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
And
So here's a federal court decision, not around this topic exactly, but it's the closest analogy that I could find, which was two people, husband and wife, each independently applied for study permits. And in each application, they declared their partner as non-accompanying because they weren't part of that application. They were each independently submitting study permits as principal applicants, declaring the other one as non, on the IMM 5406. Is your partner accompanying you? No. And they said, well, look, like we were going independently. We weren't part of the same application. And the federal court, in that case, I don't know how it would apply here, found that it was misrepresentation because each person planned on traveling to Canada. And yes, they weren't in the same application, but the intention was to actually be in Canada.
but wait, at before express entry, if you were applying for permanent residence, wasn't the question actually, is your spouse seeking permanent residence? Yes or no? Like that's still like I still have the residue of that question in my own mind. No, they're my husband, but they're not seeking permanent residence at that time. And that just meant they were going to be examined. And if they were inadmissible, so was I. But they're not seeking permanent residence. That's not a misrepresentation, even if they're here.
The issue is there's no way that it impacts the administration of
But
the
that's
act.
their problem. That's
Here,
not the
well, no, but
applicant's
it
problem.
still is whether there's a misrep, right? Like the law has been changed. And so whether someone is accompanying or not does impact whether the principal applicant qualifies for express entry. So now there is a relevant factual determination to be made, regardless of whether they say they're non-accompanying or not. Do they have an intention to be in Canada? And if they have been living
That's
here
not the
for
question they asked, though.
Yeah,
no, it doesn't matter what the question they ask, but it's like, are they accompanying or not, right? Like,
that's the
are they in
when
fact living
sorry, go
on the
on, yeah.
glossary? Because accompanying isn't defined anywhere other
No.
than the glossary, which says someone who plans to immigrate to Canada with the principal applicant. Immigrate, though, is not the submitting of a permanent resident visa, right? It's you're physically
Well, I
immigrating.
have it from the terms and definitions that it's to accompany or follow the principal applicant to Canada.
Yeah,
It's
right.
yeah.
It's not the submission of a permanent. Anyway, we'll see. There's obviously going to be litigation on this.
I mean, there has to be, right?
Yeah,
At
we're
some
drawing
point,
from other areas.
And
The
like
misrep
just
PFLs are going out.
and I'm going to point out two things. One, I tweeted yesterday a report from 2013, the IRCC research report from pre-express entry, spousal characteristics, and the selection of economic immigrants. And that was the study when they were determining whether or not they should assign points to the accompanying spouse. And I think that study actually said they shouldn't. Not because of the ability of a single applicant to immediately turn around and sponsor a spouse.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. That was from 2013. And the other thing, there was a consultant, I think Liddy, he's been tweeting pages of internal IRCC deck where they are very clearly contemplating removing spouse points altogether, which I think would just solve this obviously problem.
Yeah, for sure. Like I just find it really hard to metabolize that you can make a misrepresentation without any non-disclosure. Like you've told them you have a spouse, they're with you in Canada, and yet still be found inadmissible for misrepresentation because you haven't included them as an accompanying spouse. Like that's
well, because you specifically said that they are not accompanying you, though they are here with you.
Even
and
though
I think
you told them
reading,
they're
but on a
in the
plain
same-
reading, like what is like they are literally
Yeah, it's
accompanying you
not an
because they're
omission.
here
It's
with
a
you.
deliberate, like what Tamara is. It's a misstatement.
But they're
Anyway,
not
we'll
seeking
see.
permanent residence. Yeah. Anyways, I would happily run one of these JRs. I think it would be very interesting.
I'm sure you'll be approached because I think
I'm
this
sure.
PFLs. I think it will
It's
be
very
interesting if
mind-bending.
it's going to turn into one of those scenarios of like
Either they fix
bad
their
tax making
system
bad.
and
I
make
don't
it
actually know to what
clear.
extent people were turning around and immediately sponsoring people.
Yeah, I don't know. But again, I think Tamara's right that they weren't making sufficiently clear from the outset that this was actually a no-no. And they
I think the opposite. They said
exactly.
it was fine.
Totally. And then when it became so competitive, they changed their position on it, which is just very, it's very confusing for people.
Another one that we haven't had today, but it's been asked before and we got asked it in the advanced is, I'm just seeing if I have the question anywhere, but basically, if you are working in Canada for a foreign company, do you get points for foreign work experience? And then I remember Kubir telling me, oh God, I can't believe you tweeted this ATIP. Can you get concurrent work experience where if you're working 2 jobs at once, one for a Canadian employer, one for foreign, do you get Canadian and foreign work experience?
You can, but I think this is the next area they crack down on.
Yeah, no, this one is a very contentious issue, and because of your tweet, so many. I mean, I can show you so many videos and Instagram reels that all these agents created, where they said IRCC is now giving free points as per this lawyer.
Oh no!
I mean, that was so. If you go to the ministerial instructions, section 24, and go into that, and it says work in excess, and it is specifically talking about this concurrent work experience or simultaneous work experience, and it says you can only claim points for a single occupation at any given point of time, full-time single occupation. So that by itself tells you that people who are responding to this MREPs, they are not really going through all the regs and the ministerial instructions before they're responding to it. Because by that response that you got, and I'm sure several other consultants and lawyers got the same or similar response, where MREPs said, or the person who was responding to the MREPs was saying that concurrent work experience is acceptable, as in, but if that is acceptable, then why wouldn't you accept 60 hours work experience in Canada and give it as double the period of work? Why would you just only do it only for the foreign work experience?
Well, and that's a topic that we've been, I don't know if we have somewhere in this thread of questions, is why does IRCC not seem to prioritize why do you get more work? Why do you get more points for a combination of Canadian and foreign work than you get for just longer periods of Canadian work?
Goes back to the same 2012 discussion when these guys were designing express entry, when they never thought this would ever become an issue.
Yeah. I have to say, and again, this might be one of those things that Steve says I'm being paranoid, but then it will come to pass. And I don't think it's paranoid. But I am seeing this, I'm suspecting this thing whereby like Canada's now committed to upping its security spending for NATO targets and all this kind of stuff. And we are seeing them already. So that means that they have less money for other types of spending. So we are seeing them cutting back spending for immigration. So we're seeing fewer officers working for IRCC, more things done by machines. And I'm guessing that they're going to start attributing more of the CBSA funding to security funding, and that will be applied toward, yes, this is toward our target of hitting what we said we would spend for NATO. And so I think they're just going to be empowering CBSA to do more work, finding more areas to enforce. Anyways, maybe the connection is not correct in the big political scheme of things, but that's like, I think that there's just going to be more money going to CBSA to find ways that these areas are being exploited. So I think people should be as absolutely cautious as they possibly could be in making applications, because I think they are looking for areas to crack down on every day.
Well, right now they're going after Iranians. Seems to be the big push.
Yeah. Well, that tracks then with what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, I should be specific. IRGC members, not just Iranians writ large. But
yeah, but in terms of who they're calling an IRGC member, that is growing and growing, as we discussed in our episode a few episodes back.
Yeah. We talked about this on our podcast before. Actually, we had Kubeer on before it became all of a sudden something the media was picking up. Cap on India to ensure that, there's more diversity in country of origin. When we recorded it a couple months ago, we all predicted that there would not be a cap. Has anything changed in your assessment? Or Tamara, what are your thoughts on cap? Nothing's changed in my perception since that episode. I don't think there'll be a
I don't think they would put in, like, I just think the political implications of putting in a cap on a specific country, like, I wouldn't go there if I was them. What I would like to see is a cap or an ineligibility list for certain occupations that are vastly overrepresented in express entry, that were vastly overrepresented in the arranged employment points, and where those occupations, they've been vastly overrepresented since prior to express entry and used to be ineligible.
You're talking gas
prior
station
to express
supervisors?
Food service supervisors, retail supervisors, those 6 occupations.
Yeah.
There used to be a CEC ban on certain occupations. Remember there was that one year?
Yeah, it was
2014
cook, food
or
service,
13, they banned
yeah.
6 occupations from CEC.
Yeah, they were food service supervisors, administrative officers, administrative assistants, accounting technicians, and bookkeepers, and retail sales supervisors. And if you look back at that thing that the graph that Kubeer had posted, if you look at those occupations, the top 20 occupations in the pool, and how those occupations are still in the top 20, and they are, like, vastly overrepresented. Just those occupations. It's crazy.
And I think that that's been the case since the start of express entry, because I remember the very first report that they made. And so I think that, and again, like, casting no aspersions on that occupations, but if you ask the average Canadian, where do we see that there are the biggest labor market shortages? I think we would all agree that those are not the top occupations where there are the biggest labor market shortages. I would love to see that those continue to be places where people can apply, but they not be the top 5 occupations.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, when my LMIA experience, I've been surprised, like, cooks often literally have no one applying.
But our cooks
are
not
trade also,
yeah.
and they get Red Seal certificate of qualification.
I don't think that those
they were
should
one
be
of the ones that were banned in the CEC back in the day.
Yeah.
And speaking of cooks,
I like ethnic cooks. Like, I think that those should be part of the permitted group.
Do you like non-ethnic cooks?
No. I think that those should be CEC eligible personally, because I think that, like, somebody who lives here, like, I do understand the distinction. I think that they should still have a direct pathway, but, like, an administrative officer, like, it's just, it doesn't strike me just using just general common sense. But in terms of the country caps, going back to that, I think that I think that it's not politically sensitive to say we're going to limit the number of applicants from India, but I do think that they're finding different and more backhanded ways of doing that same thing. Like the French language program, I feel like, is kind of like a backhanded way of saying we're going to accept less applications from India.
I thought it was
the lack of STEM.
Reading the Senate reports, and the more I read the official language, whatever committee in the Senate, the more I realize that, like, they really just want francophones. Like,
but then there's way better ways of doing that. Like, there's way better ways of doing that, going to countries in Africa where they speak French as a first language, where they would create community, spending more money on ESL, French language training services, getting more like French, like, immersion programs across Canada. Like, this doesn't make sense.
No, I'm just saying, I don't think it's, we hypothesized in that episode with Kubeer about whether it was an indirect way of capping Indian immigration, but I no longer think that's the case.
And I think like if they did region specific draws, because like a big part of the Francophone push is to put them in these Francophone regions, which is like Ontario just did regional draws for the first time. If they did that, it would make sense. But like if you're like, I see this because I'm in Ottawa all the time, like an applicant applies while living in Ottawa, and then as soon as they're a PR, they literally move across the bridge.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the questions we got was, should there be an express entry regional points? I thought when they did category draws, they would do country and invite Ukrainians, which they didn't do. Regional, I feel like we have them. They're provincial nominee programs.
Yeah, but they don't have any space anymore.
Yeah, and they did when they talked about initially creating these categories. When I can't remember who was the one talking, was it Fraser who was initially talking about the categories? Like when they first brought it up, it did sound, we did think that it was going to include a region.
Yeah.
And then it,
and you're still predicting, Tamara, the municipal.
I am.
Sorry, this is an inside joke now, but every year in our annual guests, Tamara says they're going to bring in a municipal nominee program, and so
I feel it. It's going to happen.
4 strikes, you're out.
Okay. Just to answer, we got one question, which was, it's a little specific, but it's also relatively straightforward to answer, which is, in the trades draws and express entry, does experience have to be continuous or not? And it's right on the website, which is that it has to be continuous. There's an interesting issue that does arise, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, which is breaks. So if somebody has worked, for arranged employment, not that it's really a thing anymore, it used to be that you had to have 1 year of continuous employment in Canada. And did any of you see like the procedural fairness letters or refusals involving people who left for a month or two and then came back, and so it didn't? No, that used to be a bit of an issue, and uncertainty was people who are getting CEC points, how much time they were spending outside.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I saw that a long time ago when I was still doing this type of work. Yeah.
I didn't see it in the arranged employment context. I saw it in the like eligibility for CEC because they didn't actually have 12 months of boots on the ground experience, and you couldn't count vacation time outside of Canada as part of your.
That's what I mean. Exactly.
The other big one is, our firm has like several JRs on this, is people getting an LMIA and a knock after advertising with duties. They get a work permit, which lists the same duties.
Yeah.
And then, Deanna's nodding. You've probably seen it as well.
I've seen them.
Then at express entry, an officer at the permanent resident stage disagrees, essentially, with whether it was the right knock and just refuses it, which also seems to be a bit of a flavor of the.
Yeah, finding that there was a mistake made by both the ESDC officer and the prior IRCC officer in the choice of the knock, which is like.
But haven't you guys also realized it's so much of inconsistency amongst IRCC? Within IRCC itself, I mean, one officer approves something, the second officer says, no, this is not done. And the third one says, okay, I'll send you a PFL instead.
I mean, what's interesting about those cases is also like when I've read, like I've seen a few of these now, and there have been some where I looked at the knocks and I thought, I'm surprised Service Canada and the work permit person thought that this was the right knock. But then what do you do at that point when there's been, there's all sorts of issues, because then like was all their work unauthorized if they were in the knock
totally. I 100% have seen that. And it's even worse when it's like a provincial nomination that the provincial nominee program doesn't agree with the knock and they give a different, even higher level knock. And it's like,
But there are also been cases where the PNP approved the knock and then IRCC officer says, no, I don't agree with this knock.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it gets very confusing. I mean, less so now that there's no arranged employment points, because that could have been pretty fundamental. But like, it's a confusing issue.
The only one where I've seen it that like IRCC expressly said that you have to select a different knock is for like the postdoctoral fellows, where the universities have to code them under like professors on the work permit. And then IRCC expressly says, but actually select the knock of your duties. Don't select the knock that the university had to select for your work permit. But that's the only one where I've seen explicitly IRCC say do that.
We had one where someone came to us actually with a dismissed JR, which I was stunned. And they had a refusal one of the requirements of express entry, as you all know, is that you have to declare your knock. And they declared that they were senior management construction. An IRCC officer disagreed, saying that we think you're senior management, not elsewhere classified. So 0014
Oh
to
my God.
0015. And so they refused it, not on the basis of whether the person had done the duties and even whether they should have qualified to immigrate, but just that they declared the knock wrong. And I'm not going to say the lawyer who JR'd it, but like it was a fine JR,
Oh my
dismissed
God.
without leave.
Yeah, but that's very strange because for those knock codes, it says within the knock code itself that mobility between these knock is allowed.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. And then what do you do once you've been denied leave? Like, if you might not get another invite too. Like, it's just.
I mean, we wound up just like they came to us, we reapplied. It was fine.
Okay. Well,
It was
it's fine as long as
an easy fix. Well, no, they would say like, because we had to extend their temporary resident status,
Yeah.
but at the express entry level, it was like just changing the knock number.
That's nuts. Yeah.
I
2 years
have a
later.
question for you guys. What do you guys think about Lena Diab so far?
I've barely seen her.
Oh, she made an announcement about how, I can't remember what it was. I just remember that I posted it on my firm's feed, where she was talking about how she wants Canada to meet this new mandate of like best and the brightest, and that the Strong Borders Act will allow us to accomplish that. And I almost choked on it.
You know what? I would say when there are immigration news stories referencing changes, they still post pictures of Mark Miller. So I
And
think
sometimes
that kind of
Fraser.
just summarizes it all as like the new minister is a bit invisible to such an
Yeah.
extent that like, yeah, they run pictures of other ministers who I think are more recognizable as being the
Right.
people who are changing things. And Mark Miller's not even in cabinet.
Yeah, that's right. I just find that the out of touch nature of what they're doing and what they're saying they're doing is so extreme right now that like
Out of
this-
touch nature is such a polite term for gaslighting.
Yes, correct. Correct. Like that they're talking about their best and brightest strategy when what we are all agreed upon is that this is the bottom feeder kind of strategy, like that it's not, and actually that we are being spoken of, the bar, as like in favor of fraud, in favor of abuse of the system. Like it's very gaslighting, and that the Strong Border Act is about like elbows up. It's like, what are we talking about? It's very confusing.
And like the fact that they could say with a straight face that like they've stopped doing federal skilled trade draws because they think they can actually get just as many and just as good through CEC and through the trade category, when like we know it's not as many occupations and they're still only doing two trade category draws a year, and the trades can't get drawn through CEC because they don't have enough points, because they don't get education points by and large. Like the fact that they can say that with a straight face,
yeah,
is
it's
so
alarming.
upsetting.
Yeah, it's alarming. Yeah, and the Strong Border Act, like I cannot say in strong enough terms how frightening that piece of legislation is.
Nice pun.
Yeah, like it's really chilling. And that, like, you know, to say that we are taking a strong position against Donald Trump, and yet that is like exactly the piece of legislation he would have crafted for us.
Yeah, we'll have to do we're going to do a whole dedicated episode to it at some time, unlike with the
but then we have been
stuff law, whatever it's
feeders,
called, they didn't rush.
But we have been bottom feeders since 2021. What was TRPR? What was 75 CRS? What was that spate of that low score draws throughout the whole year? I mean, that's
so
what
well put. So well put, Kabir. It's like, yeah. I mean, and we've been trying to like flounder our way through things ever since then. Like, what are we doing with all these, international students that were offered to come in and then set themselves up and spent their life savings on education, and now we're saying, sorry, we're done with you. Like it's colossally bad. So yeah, I'm not in favor.
Yeah, I think I want to conclude with this question, which is some sort of a variation that I'm sure you all get. Yeah, there's either when are the points coming down, and we all seem to agree that they won't, or at least this year. I think
I
Tamara
think
said
2 to 3 years.
2027, 2 to 3 years.
Yeah,
They stick with the
I think there's
2025 to 2027 levels plan.
I think you look at when the last post-graduation work permit holder public policy people expired, which is June of this year. Once they age out or whatever of the 3 years of CEC, that's when I think we start seeing a marked decline.
But that's kind of because the people that are in these types of situations will have to leave, is it not? Like,
yes, because they will no longer be eligible for CEC, and like they're the ones with the crazy high points. They have some of them 5 years, 6 years of Canadian work experience. They have Canadian education. By and large, they're super young. And so like that's in my opinion, the vast majority of the people who are in that 500 plus category right now.
right,
But they're there for
right,
the next, 3 years.
right. They'll use up the entire space.
Yeah.
The number of
Yeah.
study permits is going down. The number of applicants from India, because that forms the largest contingent as far as international students is concerned, that has gone down, I think, by almost 80%. The statistics which said that we had only a 0% growth, I don't agree with it. I think a lot of data which is skewed there to sort of suggest that. But overall, yeah, I agree with Tamara. I think over the next 2 years, I mean, I wouldn't even go to the third one, but I think over the next 2 years, you will see a generic decline throughout. But people, are they going to have patience to wait that long? Number one. Number two, can people wait for that long, given their scores at what they would be struggling at right now? So basically, this would help those individuals who are currently studying in Canada, provided they complete the 2 years and then they have the 3-year work permit. So those people, those individuals may benefit from this reduced table a couple of years down the line. But for the next year or so, I don't see anything going down at all.
Yeah. So does that mean that our advice for our poor friend Hitendra is that, like, basically, if you can hang on
Learn
as
French.
but
Learn
even
French.
still, like, maintaining, like, French wouldn't be enough.
It's the most patronizing thing to tell.
No,
someone.
French would be enough. I mean, if this guy Hitendra, if he can actually get to CLB 7, then he would get 62 extra points, also making him eligible in the Francophone category. And even if he gets to CLB 5, he can still apply for a closed work permit, provided he gets an employer, allowing him another 2 years, gets his extra points, buys the time. And if he's got to CLB 5, that should motivate him to get to CLB 7. Hey, because we love French, right?
Yeah, I mean, somebody
assuming
asked
that they don't change course in the meantime, and then you spend all this time and energy.
It's this political campaign notion that we will increase Francophone immigration to 12% by another 4%, which should take effect from, I think we should see that in the PR targets on 1st of November.
I mean, I said this on Kubir's show in answer to this person. What is your opinion on them dropping French? Maybe, as a way to achieve it. I want to actually do 2 hypotheticals. And maybe this, I know I said before it would be our last question, but there's 2 hypotheticals. Hypothetical number 1, they have this target of 5% PR by, or 5% of Canada's population being temporary residents by 2027. 2 questions. Number 1, if they don't hit it, one thing that I've heard on another podcast is Bill C2 that Deanna was talking about, gives the minister the ability, well, cabinet, to basically cancel documents. Do they just cancel a ton of work permits and study permits to get to 5%? And then the converse, once that 5% is hit, if it is hit, what do you see happening with Canadian immigration law? Does it take off from there? Does it stay tight? Is 5% the new standard?
I think 5% is the new standard, right? Like right now, politically, there's just no desire for immigration politically. But I think by 2027, like the market is going to say, like, we need these foreign workers, like this blanket, like across the board, foreign workers, we don't need them. That, like, this attitude, we all know because we deal with the employers, that like there are occupations you just can't fill here.
Yeah.
We don't have the expertise. We don't have the schools, like vets. We have 8 schools in Canada. They're not churning out sufficient vets. Well, where are they supposed to come from?
Yeah. Somebody said this at the conference, I think it was, that, like, you want to get rid of this number of people here in Canada. Well, you also have to understand that you'll also lose that number of nurses and doctors in the, in the system. You have to be willing to accept both things.
But you know what, like, I think is their most impactful policy at actually getting rid of people is the removal of the open work permit for the vast majority of the spouses, because I think that's going to make it completely non-palatable and not possible for a lot of foreign workers to stay here. Because they won't be able to support their families on one income. And
two houses, like in different countries, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have a different theory on this. In order to meet the 2027 targets, I think they've already started. And the way to do it is by refusing more and more work permit applications.
100%.
Applications. That's an easier way of doing it. Like, just refuse them for any reason whatsoever.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to go the JR route. And
it's too expensive. Yeah.
And fundamentally get rid of that many applications, that many people. They're not even extending applications. They are refusing study permit extension applications. They are refusing applications for extension of, like, for example, spouse open work permits. Individuals who are eligible, they meet the 16-month criteria. They have the principal applicant has the work experience in the relevant NOC code. In spite of that, they're refusing those applications. And as I said, not everybody's going to go the JR route.
No, and any litigator will tell you, any lawyer in the immigration field will tell you, the quality of decisions are so poor that like we can literally fill our boots with cases, but they're time consuming. They're a ton of work, and you wait sometimes 2 years to be able to get your decision. And so, people just will have no choice but to opt out of doing the litigation, and that will be, that will be the outcome. So I think Kubeer is 100% right.
Yeah. And the irony of it all is the people who they want to stay the most are the ones with options in multiple places who will leave. And
so this goes to your second question then, Steve, is like, what will happen? I think that even though I agree with you, Tamara, that they will want to change their mind, I really wonder what they've done to what we've done to our own reputation. People that were incredibly good candidates who then took off because they didn't want to spend $10,000 on litigation to try and fight a stupid decision. Will they be inclined to come back again, or will they think Canada mistreated them? And I believe they will think that.
Or will they want to come in the first place? They can't buy a house here. Their spouse can't work. If their kids leave and now they're out of status because they were on a visitor record and nobody stamped them in and they didn't, like, we've made it so not palatable to come here.
And they'll tell all their friends. Yeah. And I keep using this example on every interview I do. Like, you're a PhD in climate science and you're having to take time off to learn French. Even though you're at the top of your field, like, you're just going to be like, what is this place? Like, why do they think that they can say that I'm not skilled and that I am not worthy of an invitation? But, this guy, who's 20 years old, like, it starts feeling very insulting. And so I think that's going to get out there into the world. And that's why I choke when I hear Minister Diab saying we are designing a system that's for the best and the brightest. It's not how it feels to the user at all.
Yeah.
Yep. It's I think that's it for today. Kubeer, I don't know how you keep up with the amount of comments coming in. We're live streaming this on Kubeer's YouTube channel, which is, I think, 10 times the amount of comments at least that we normally get are coming in, including people who are paying for comments that are, some of them are very detailed. And so I don't know. I don't know how you normally handle these. I don't. But yeah, I don't know. Some of them are just leaving like, it's. I don't know how you do it. I struggled to keep up with the amount of comments that were coming in, which was great. It was amazing. But wow, was it a lot?
We have another session to answer the unanswered questions.
Right.
I mean, all I would say is, for whoever is commenting, and if your questions are not answered after this live stream is over, please comment again under the video, and at least on my live stream on my channel, I will come back today and tomorrow, and I will answer to most of the questions that have been commented below. But thank you for commenting.
Awesome, and thanks for handling the comment.
It's always a pleasure to collaborate with you, Kubeer.
No, this was great. We'll have to do it again soon.
Yeah, this was a good panel.
No, thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Tamara. Thank you, Steve.